Welcome to Drawing 101. First section we're going to talk about is shading. I want you to have your 2B pencil, your 4B, and your 6B pencil, and if possible an H pencil for the final stage of the drawing to do some nice fine details. You're also going to need an eraser, and of course you're going to need your amazingly accurate contour drawing that you did in class. Okay? Last but not least, you must have your shoe with you at all times, or whatever object you're actually drawing needs to be in front of you at all times. Even if you think you know everything about it, you don't. So make sure it's with you all the time. Okay, let's get drawing! As you go through your drawing, if you discover aspects of the original drawing that are incorrect, now's the time to fix them. That's what you have your eraser for, and the eraser is just as much a drawing tool as your pencil is, so you need to remember that. So the first thing, of course, you've got this amazing contour drawing, and the painful first thing I'm going to make you do is erase it. Before you start shading, you don't want to have a huge amount of the original pencil drawing showing through, because that leads to having outlines showing on your drawing. Having an outline on a shaded object creates an illusion of flatness. It takes away the three-dimensional shape you're trying to achieve and kind of cheats the space. So erase that contour so you can still see it, like that. You can still see it, but you're erasing the majority of the outline. Okay, second thing you need to do, you need to look. You need to look very closely at your object. You're always looking for things like highlights and shadows. For where I'm sitting right now, I can see various highlights over the ridges of this shoe. I can see shadows showing. When you tackle each part of this drawing, you should try to finish it in that working section in that amount of time, because every time you go back to it, it's going to change. All the shades are going to change. So if possible, try to finish that section while you're working on it at that time. Another thing that you want to have with you is a little piece of paper that can cover the side of your hand. The most important reason for that is that despite how clean your hands might be, there are always oils on the side of your hand that can transfer into the paper and make it more difficult for you to shade later. You'll find that you get these little oily spots on your drawing and then you can't erase things. It's very frustrating. So have a piece of paper under your hand while you're working. It also helps you move around and glide around the drawing quite easily. Okay, so when you start shading, you want to start to look for shaded areas for shadows and start to build those in slowly. Start by working with your lightest pencil, which in your case is most likely a 2B pencil. And eventually you're going to go back into those shaded areas, those shadows. You're going to add in 4B or 6B. I want you to notice that I'm working with the direction of the object. And what I mean by that is that the surface of this shoe is a rounded surface. So I don't want to fight the sense of that roundness by suddenly drawing in an up and down line that's very angular and blocky. As soon as you start doing things like that, it fights the sense of three-dimensionality that you're trying to create. So as you work with your 2B to start, constantly be observing and looking at your shoe. Look for the highlights and the shadows and layer it in slowly with the direction of the object. You can see how I'm layering, even though I'm starting with a darker section. I'm never just starting by, okay, this is the darkest shadow I've got. I'm never going to just start going into it like this. No, no, no. It's all about slowly layering, keeping your lines close together like this, and then going back over top of those original lines to make the color darker, to make the value darker rather. When we're talking about trying to capture really light layers or light places on your drawing, you almost want to think about your pencil sort of wisping over the surface of the drawing. We still want to see some values throughout, but you almost want your pencil to just sometimes touch the paper and sometimes not touch the paper. Imagine that it's sometimes your pencil stroke is going over and it's just ghosting the actual shape. Other times it's landing and it's touching down on the paper. When you use that kind of a technique, you're going to get that slow build-up of value, especially what you want in an area that's brighter, that's more like a highlight. There are going to be places on your drawing where there are pure whites, for instance, in here and here, where I want to show a real bright point of light. Once you've sort of built up the general area, you're going to go back in with your 4B, your 6B, and you're going to start to exaggerate your shadows. I want you to think about using an artistic license when you're drawing. Your goal in this project, to a certain extent, is replication, but it's also to make the drawing more interesting and more exciting than the actual object itself. When people look at the picture of your shoe, they're going to be amazed at what you've created, and they're not going to be so amazed by looking at a regular old shoe that they see all the time. There are going to be a few places where you're going to have some of those details showing in outlines. Remember before I said erase all of your outlines? That's not true of all parts of your drawing. There's places where there's obvious lines showing, especially on a shoe. There's a place where you need lines to happen because it looks like detail. So in this area here, I want you to notice how I'm not shading the toe of the shoe anymore. I'm shading the bottom of the shoe, and that has a different sense of direction to it, right? It seems to wrap around the shoe. So now my lines have changed to a sideways motion rather than a curved motion that was happening on the top of the shoe. After you've shaded the majority of the area, then you can go in with a nice dark pencil and find some places where you know you need some lines. So your final stage is to look for details, add in lines where you think they're necessary. And I think along this side of the shoe I also have a bit of a stitch. So I can go in and actually add those in as my final stage. The final stage, once everything's done, is details. After you've completed the entire drawing, you may notice, even if you've been using a nice piece of paper under your hand, you may notice that all this back and forth on top of your drawing has done this, where you get these fuzzy areas. Don't forget to spend a moment cleaning up the edge of your sketch, cleaning out the highlights where you've maybe dragged some values in. Clean them out with that eraser. As you're working on any drawing, it's important to take breaks from it. It's important to stop what you're doing, step back from it a little bit, look at it and see how it's progressing. See if there's any mistakes, see if there's anything you need to fix. To me, the toe of the shoe is starting to look a little bit exaggerated. So maybe I need to check and see if these highlights or these shadows are accurate, or maybe I need to check and see if that line is right. Well, we could go on for hours, but that's the basics of shading. Happy drawing!